So with all the talk of changes in COVID restrictions and things like that, which are obviously very ill-advised, we have surging case numbers, and the effectiveness of the vaccine obviously is put at huge risk when we have more people getting infected, because then the virus is more likely to mutate, and therefore is more likely to mutate in a way that makes it resistant to vaccines. So it's a terrible idea for us to just lift all restrictions on the 19th of June. And I think it is because Boris Johnson is just sick and tired of doing it, and can't be bothered with dealing with this anymore. But while all that's been going on, a bill has passed Parliament. You might have heard of it. It's been nicknamed the Police Crackdown Bill, but it does have a proper full name. I believe it's called the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill. That's the, there's a big proper fancy name, but for all intents and purposes it's the Police Crackdown Bill. And it was that bill that a lot of people were protesting. I think it was a month or two ago, that would have allowed the police to essentially stop any peaceful protest, not just a violent protest, a peaceful protest, if it was deemed to cause serious annoyance or if it was particularly noisy. So that bill has passed the House of Commons. Every Conservative who was present, or at least, sorry, most Conservatives who were present voted for it. There were, I think there were a couple who didn't. David Davis was very vocal in his opposition to it. But unfortunately that was not enough, and the bill has passed. So it's really a very concerning turn of events. So we now have a situation where, on the one hand, there are Conservatives saying that, this bill is essential. We need to make sure that we stop all these loony lefties from disrupting the normal flow of everyday life. We need to give more power to the police, more power to the government, so that they can just stop them from messing around, because they're just complaining, right? Despite the fact that there's a huge amount of evidence that the things that often get protested about in this country, especially by young people, are very real issues. For example, obviously the climate crisis. We are hurtling towards oblivion, and no one seems to care in any position of influence or power or extreme wealth or anything. So that obviously makes it. And then with the Black Lives Matter stuff, there's plenty of evidence of racial inequities in the UK, and it's very evident to me that that there's a clear motivation, right, behind that the government has for doing this. They know that generally they're the ones being protested against, either in part or totally, and therefore, it doesn't look good on them, and it can pressure them into doing things they don't want to do. So you have Conservatives saying that on one hand, and then on the other hand they're saying we love freedom of speech, so much so that sod all the vulnerable people, sod all the people who can't get vaccinated, sod all the young people who haven't been vaccinated yet. We want everything to open up, and we're not going to wear masks because that's so difficult. So it's kind of a strange, they think that lockdowns to save people's lives from a deadly virus, that is, infringing on their freedom, that's fascistic. But, making it illegal to peacefully protest if you're being annoying or noisy, which is like the whole point of a protest, right? You're causing a bit of kerfuffle, you're causing a bit of trouble, you're causing an inconvenience for the people in power. That's literally the whole point, because then you get them to act, potentially. That if you stopping all those things, that's not fascistic, that's great. So it's a very, very, very odd situation, and I think it's sad that right-wingers have got themselves in this kind of situation where they have to twist and turn and, to try and actually really legitimise their arguments, because it's a very hypocritical stance, in my opinion, right? So what can we do though, right? This bill has passed and it's done now, right? Well, no. It does seem very likely this bill will become law. But we need to put as much pressure as we possibly can on the House of Lords. You know, there's people you should write to. You should write to as many of the Lords as you possibly can. We should definitely consider, ironically, protesting. And if it passes the Lords, fight it in the courts, right? We've got to try every single avenue. And I'm sure there'll already be people in positions of substantial legal know-how that will be, and legal expertise that will be trying to do this. But it's going to be, and you know, they'll be preparing for it. But it's a very sad day for Britain. You know, we are becoming, I think, a managed democracy. Well, you know, the people have the illusion of democracy, and they can still technically vote in technically free and fair elections, sort of. But now, you know, it's all kind of, it's all screwed because the media predominantly, you know, I mean about 80% of the media is owned by 5 billionaires. Now that says to me, perhaps the party that most often, I mean, Labour is a total shambles at the moment, and Keir Starmer doesn't have a clue what he stands for, and they just readmitted Trevor Phillips to the party, even though he's a massive Islamophobe and has said anti-Semitic things before. So it's absolutely bonkers that they've done that. I really don't get that. Then, you know, so but I don't think it's a mistake that when a political party like Labour did under Corbyn suggests maybe we should greatly increase taxes on these ultra wealthy, on these super rich people, you know, talking people worth hundreds of millions or billions of pounds, and use that money to fund social programmes, fund the NHS, education, infrastructure, fighting climate change, stuff like that, that they get demonised by the billionaire-owned media, and the party that wants to preserve and enhance those people's wealth and influence, they're the ones who get an easy ride from them. So, you know, I despair a little bit. I really do. Can't even remember what my original point was. But if you think, you know, we're doomed, right? If you think we're doomed, don't despair, because when you despair, you don't do anything about it. You don't act. And I won't despair. All right, I won't. But it's hard. It's hard not to, because this is just obviously bad legislation. And the government is looking to introduce voter ID laws, which will make it mandatory that when you go to vote in an election in the UK, you present an official government ID. Now, you know, like a passport or a driving licence. Now, that's all well and good, but those things are actually pretty expensive, especially if you're a person on low income or you're on benefits or something. So, a lot of working class people, a lot of poorer people won't be able to afford that. They will be turned away at the ballot box. And when that policy was trialled, over 1,000 people were turned away. I think it was in like a handful of constituencies, but literally so many people were turned away. And it's estimated that about 2 million people could potentially be disenfranchised by this. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And unless the government is willing to give out free official ID to everyone, then it's a terrible policy. They could do that, and that would be fine, right? Be a waste of taxpayer money, because voter fraud is a non-existent problem. Like, it just doesn't. There's been 4 incidences, 4 in the past 10 years. Think about it. We've had, in fact, I think it's since the 2010 election, right? So we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 general elections in that time, and I'm not sure if that statistic includes local elections and EU elections and mayoral elections and stuff like that. But even if it doesn't include that, think about it. There's been over 100 million votes cast from the 2010 election through the 2019 election, and you're seriously telling me that of 100 million, 4, that's because of 4 incidences of voter fraud, you think that's where, you know, we need to disenfranchise 2 million people? Absolutely ridiculous. I've heard people say that Labour are trying to steal elections and stuff, which is just unfathomable to me. Like, oh yeah, Labour's always cheating, that's why they haven't won a general election since 2005. It's ridiculous. But anyway, we have to fight this as best we can. We have to try and make sure that voter ID law does not get into place. And of course, it's a real shame that Keir Starmer and the Labour leadership particularly the right of the Labour Party, don't seem to care at all about the police crackdown bill, or at least not very much about the police crackdown bill, and not a great deal about the voter ID laws. And they haven't even levied any particularly effective or scathing criticism of the government on the rushing of the of opening up, and the way that that's been done so haphazardly, and how that's going to be very dangerous. So, you know, we're on our own here. We can't rely on the Labour Party, because right now it does not represent working people. It does not represent regular people. And I think, you know, obviously Keir Starmer has to go, I think. But for now, we got to keep fighting it. So maybe I'll see you on the streets. Who knows? Let me know in the comments though how you feel about this, because I think it's an interesting thing that people are kind of defending this bill, and defending generally the Conservatives' authoritarian tendencies. So what is your rationale if you believe that it's right? And if you don't, then great, but continue to, you know, explain your point of view anyway, because you might have some different, you know, reasons to me. So thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.